Coming up today, President Park Geun-hye is set to travel to Russia, China and Laos for a series of multilateral summits and one-on-ones with world leaders. She'll attempt to win support for Seoul's North Korea policies. Korea's ruling party says it will not approve a multi-billion-dollar supplementary budget unless the National Assembly Speaker says sorry for controversial comments made during his opening speech at this Parliament's first regular session. Plus, Hanjin Shipping's slow slide towards bankruptcy is sending shockwaves around global ports and impacting world trade. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Friday, September 2nd here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this morning, President Park Geun-hye heads on an 8-day trip to Russia, China and Laos. On this Friday, the economy and security will be the focal point of discussions at the multilateral summits and her one-on-ones with other world leaders. Our presidential office correspondent Song Ji-son starts us off.
President Park's trip begins in Vladivostok, where she'll attend the Eastern Economic Forum. Park will deliver a speech as the guest of honor at the event hosted by Russian President Vladimir Putin, aimed at fostering development and growth in the Far East. Seeking to jointly counter North Korea's growing nuclear threat will be one item on the agenda during bilateral talks with Putin. At her next stop, the G20 in Hangzhou, China, she'll hold a sideline summit with the president of the host country, Xi Jinping. President Park will likely call on Beijing to play a greater role in pressuring Pyongyang on its nuclear ambitions and try to bring China closer to Seoul's position on the deployment of the U.S. THAAD missile defense system to counter those threats.
The presidential visit is aimed at boosting the potential for economic growth while strengthening cooperation with the international community in denuclearizing North Korea by implementing UN Security Council resolutions.
A series of bilateral talks with Saudi Arabia, Egypt and Italy is also scheduled during the G20 summit. At this year's meeting, where inclusive growth is the key phrase, Park will promote Seoul's innovation drive as a new model for global growth.
President Park will propose Seoul's creative economy as a model for an innovative, inclusive economy to contribute to the G20's future growth, while also calling for a greater role for the member countries in promoting free trade against recent protectionism.
At her last stop, the ASEAN Summit in Vientiane, Laos, Park will seek to lay the foundations for greater trade and investment with the massive economic bloc. President Park will sit down with U.S. President Barack Obama, while talks with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe are also being arranged. In a series of bilateral and multilateral summits, President Park will repeat her call for world leaders to guide Pyongyang to the right choice by sending a strong message for the implementation of international sanctions. Song Ji-son, Arirang News.
Now, China will be hosting its first G20 summit and is determined to make the event a success. Visible measures include shutting down factories and tightening security. Our Hwang Jie files this report from Hangzhou.
Hangzhou, located 2 hours away by car from Shanghai, is a city renowned for being one of China's 7 ancient capitals. It boasts its picturesque natural scenery like here at the West Lake. But the city is not just about scenic attractions. It's also home to the headquarters of Alibaba, China's biggest e-commerce company. The local GDP ranks 10th among all of the country's 600-plus cities. And this week, Hangzhou will bring together leaders from around the world for the G20 summit. Through this event, China hopes to put on display its rise as a global power by successfully seeing through the international gathering without a hitch. Security checks are extremely heavy here in Hangzhou in eastern China ahead of the G20 summit set to take place in early September. Security guards and police officers are seen every 5 to 10 meters around this Olympic sports center that you see behind me, where the meeting will take place. A drive around the city shows eerily empty but pristine streets ready to greet visitors. Factories are closed for the first 7 days of the month, designated a temporary holiday by the government for local residents. This is all to make sure the city is free of safety risks. Although a disruption to people's everyday lives, we found most enduring with pride.
It's for safety reasons, and the event also brings vitality to the country. I can't understand.
I support the event taking place here, so it's okay.
It's really nice that the event raised our reputation locally and internationally. Residents here are glad that Hangzhou is hosting the G20. We hope to see more of these events.
Only a couple of days now remain until the event. During the annual meeting, world leaders from 20 different countries, as well as leaders from global organizations like the UN and the IMF, will discuss issues centering on low-growth woes threatening the world economy, in hopes of finding a common solution. Hwang-jie, Arirang News, Hangzhou.
Now back here in Korea, and attempts to pass a $9.8 billion supplementary budget failed yet again on Thursday after a contentious speech by the Speaker of the National Assembly. Now these funds are deemed necessary to breathe some life into the nation's stagnant economy. For more on what was an unproductive day at the National Assembly, Ji Myung-gil reports.
The ruling Saenuri Party was furious over the content of Thursday's parliamentary address by National Assembly Speaker Chung Se-kyun.
It's hard to tell whether he's the Speaker of the National Assembly or someone affiliated with a biased pressure group. The Speaker is responsible for today's failure to vote on the hard-won extra budget bill. He's not qualified to be Korea's Assembly Speaker.
Speaker Chung had touched on sensitive political issues, urging the scandal-ridden senior presidential secretary for civil affairs Woo Byung-woo to resign. He also voiced his opposition to the deployment of U.S. anti-missile system THAAD.
There are some difficulties in agreeing that the government's attitude towards THAAD stands on the same line as being our leading countermeasure against the North.
Korea's National Assembly Speaker is required to leave aside his party affiliation when carrying out his duties. The ruling party said Speaker Chung had violated that rule. Therefore, the ruling party adopted a resolution calling on Speaker Chung to step down from his post. Meanwhile, the main opposition Minju Party of Korea accused the Saenuri Party for using the Speaker's address as an excuse to boycott the plenary session, calling it a well-calculated political motive to disrupt the passage of the budget supplement. After days of marathon talks over the $9.8 billion in extra spending, the rival parties had agreed to vote on the bill on Thursday. As for next year's budget, it is uncertain when the relevant parliamentary committees will start reviewing the spending plan worth $360 billion, as the National Assembly needs to finalize the bill by December 2nd. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Now, Hanjin Shipping's decision to file for court receivership this week has sent shockwaves around the globe. For more on how the shipper's fall from grace is affecting world trade, Hwang Ho-jun reports.
Less than 24 hours since the trade giant of Korea filed for bankruptcy protection, and the news has shocked the global trade market. Ports around the world, including those in China, Spain, and the US, have denied access to Hanjin ships over fears that Hanjin's creditors could seize the cargo vessels before they dock, not to mention the ships potentially not being able to pay their fees. In fact, a smaller-sized Hanjin vessel, the Hanjin Rome, was seized by a creditor in Singapore late on Monday. Experts say more docks around the world will follow suit. The Wall Street Journal reported that U.S. exporters are jostling to rebook containers with other carriers to reload their cargoes ahead of the retail boom that accompanies Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, and Christmas. Hanjin Shipping has halted its operations, and with global market share of 2.9%, the drop in tonnage will likely lead to skyrocketing costs.
Shipping companies have a lot of customers outside of Korea, so Hanjin's case is rather a global public concern with a greater impact than other companies.
A Korean court will determine as early this week whether Hanjin should be liquidated or given a chance to restructure and possibly survive. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
The eldest son of the founder of Korean retail giant Lotte Group is back home this morning after a grueling 17-hour questioning session at the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office. Shin Dongjoo was quizzed over allegations he received over $35 million from the group's major affiliates. Prosecutors suspect he received the money as a stipend by just being listed as a board member of the companies between 2006 and 2015. Shin refused to answer reporters' questions when he left the prosecutor's office at 3 a.m. Korea time, around 3 hours ago now. But some sources say he admitted to accepting the money, although that is not confirmed. There is an ongoing probe into Lotte Group's irregularities that include the creation of massive slush funds and embezzlement. The head of the International Monetary Fund has issued a stark warning ahead of this year's G20 summit. Christine Lagarde on Thursday called on world leaders to take decisive action to revitalise the sluggish global economy. Her remarks come as G20 leaders prepare to gather in the Chinese city of Hangzhou this weekend. Lagarde said the world is facing high debt, weak demand, eroding workforces and labour skills, weakening incentives for investment and slowing productivity. Lagarde also noted that as of 2016, global economic growth had stagnated for 5 years below the 3.7% average that was prevalent between 1990 and 2007. She said weak global growth coupled with rising economic inequality feeds a political climate in which countries resort to inward-looking policies. Singapore is battling an outbreak of the Zika virus. The number of locally transmitted Zika virus infections in that country has jumped to 151 in just 6 days. 31 new cases were confirmed on Thursday alone. Singapore's Ministry of Health and the National Environment Agency added that 3 of the latest cases are not linked to any existing cluster. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong warns that Singapore must assume Zika is elsewhere in the country, apart from locations that have seen the majority of cases so far. The National Environment Agency called for residents to cooperate with the agency and allow its officers to inspect their premises for mosquito breeding and spray insecticide to kill any mosquitoes. A SpaceX rocket has exploded during a test from a launch pad in Cape Canaveral in Florida. New video shows the moment the unmanned Falcon 9 blew up on the launch pad as it was undergoing final preparations. Its mission was supposed to involve delivering a satellite to orbit, which was expected to help expand Facebook's broadband communication abilities. It was due to help realize CEO Mark Zuckerberg's vision of bringing the internet to areas of sub-Saharan Africa. You've seen the aftermath of the explosion there. A company spokesman said there was an anomaly on the pad resulting in the loss of the vehicle and its payload. He added that as standard procedure, the pad was clear and there were no injuries. The Global Tech Consumer Gala, IFA, kicks off in Berlin later on this Friday, along with CES in Las Vegas and the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. IFA is considered one of the top 3 tech and home appliance exhibitions. Organisers say this year's main themes are Internet of Things, virtual reality, 3D printing and smart networking. Korean tech giants Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics will be pitching their latest innovations at the show. More than 1,800 exhibitors will pack into the Berlin Expo Center City, a 26-building complex covering 170,000 square meters. Unlike CES, IFA is open to the public and admission is expected to top last year's draw of around 240,000. The exhibition runs through next Wednesday. Well, that's all we have for now on this Friday morning here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for tuning in. We will be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Our next bulletin is coming up at 10 a.m. Korea time. Have a great day, and if we don't see you, a wonderful weekend. Goodbye.